Hey, it's Steve Pollock. Welcome to Legacy in a Glass podcast. Today we got a real interesting topic we're going to talk about, but before we get there, I want to introduce the guest, and I don't think we could find a more educated guy as far as the topic we're going to talk about than Adam Housley. Adam, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Steve?
Adam Housley is a wine owner of Century Oak Winery. We did some business. I know his father for a long time, Art. We did some business when I worked for the PLCB many years ago under the Century Oak brand. And me and Adam actually just got back together over the last couple of months. It's weird how these relationships never go away in this industry. And I was real close with his father, and I knew that he was he's been an international correspondent was it CNN for years?
I was with Fox actually in the news division, so we would go all over the world covering earthquakes and tsunamis and stuff like that.
So there's nobody better to talk about what we're going to talk about in the present time, which is the California wildfires that have been going on year after year. And this year, I mean, I guess they set a record from what I'm seeing on the news. Over 5 million acres have burned, and we're going to discuss the impact that has on not only the wine industry, but the microclimates and the environment of what's left after these fires come through, whether it's a vineyard or just the way they're burning right across California. So, Adam, what are you seeing out there? Because, you've been on the front lines with not only being a journalist and seeing all this chaos, but, boy, I've been watching the news. It's apocalyptic, some of the scenes you're seeing, like just orange. I mean, it looks like something out of a zombie movie, for crying out loud.
Yeah, it's weird. I've covered fires when I was in local news for 4 years or 3.5 years, and then I covered it nationally for almost 17 years. So I've probably been to 50 or 60 fires easy around the country. And growing up in California, they've been kind of inherent. You knew about them, and you've seen them since you were a kid. They've grown larger and more frequent. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. And I'm not going to get the politics of it. I can just tell you what we've seen and what we felt. And what was weird this year, as compared to 2017 was, so covering all those fires, I've never felt like I was on Mars. Only one other time. And that was when we were covering fires in Ventura back in 2017. So you guys might remember the last really bad fire season in the wine country was just a few years ago. And a lot of folks, dumped their grapes because of it. And about a month later, there was massive fires in Los Angeles, north of Los Angeles and Ventura and they basically blew over towards and all the way into Santa Barbara. And I remember coming to a little town called Carpinteria. We were there for several days. I walked outside at like 1:00 in the afternoon, and it looked like it was, dusk, and it was that way for 3 full days. That was the first time I'd ever experienced that. So when Napa had their fires a couple of weeks ago, it was smoky for a few days, 3 or 4 days. It was smoky. The fires were mostly up in the hills, and they affected families up there, unfortunately, but they didn't come down into the city this time. And after a few days, the skies cleared. And then all of a sudden, about a week later, we had our massive heat wave here. And, Napa, people don't realize Napa is a warm area. It's 88 to 92 every day. And usually once or twice a year, we'll get 100 some odd degrees. Well, it was the third time we've had 110 degrees here in the summer. Once in May, once in July or June, and now once in August. And when those 110 degree temperatures hit about a week and a half ago, all of a sudden it went from being clear to smoky because of the fires over in the Sierra and up in Oregon. They weren't even our fires this time. And for a solid 8, 9, 10 days, I would say 10 days, it's been like you're walking in an ashtray. And one of those days, what you're referring to, Steve, was on a Tuesday. I'll never forget. I woke up to get the kids to go to school. Well, not to go to school, but to go to their streaming class. And it was still dark outside. And it was dark at our tasting room until 10:30 in the morning. And when you finally had some light, it was red. It was the most bizarre day I've lived in a long time in regards to weather. And it was really smoky and ashy for, again, until about 3 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, it started to clear up. So we had about 10 days of just, again, living in an ashtray.
Yeah, and me and you spoke. Me and Adam speak many times during the week because we're actually working with his brand Century Oak and another wine called The Family. He's doing some really great stuff, changing some labels and some really unique modern stuff. The wines are incredible. I just reviewed 2 of his wines and we'll put them up on the website. I sent them to you, Adam, last night. But the key with us, we were talking the other night and 3,000 miles away. I'm in Northeast Pennsylvania, and I sent him a picture from the sky here, and I text him and I said, it looks like Mars here. I mean, these clouds, we've had no clouds for the last 5 days, but we have a blanket of smoke that's traveled on the jet stream 3,000 miles away, and it orange out the sun, and instead of being 80 here, it's like 65. So it's totally amazing how something like that, the climate, just affects the whole country, the whole world.
Yeah. It's crazy how things have changed. When you told me that, I was like, what? So I went to my computer, you sent me the photo. When I got home, I pulled my computer up and I looked, and I was shocked about the pictures from Pennsylvania, New York, that area where you guys were getting smoke from out here in the West. And then when you looked at the West smoke picture, it was basically from halfway up British Columbia all the way to Mexico, east to west. It was several, I forget how many miles offshore, all the way inland into Nevada. Idaho was all red, Washington, Oregon, California. I mean, just blanketed with smoke. It was insane. And I haven't seen that in all my times covering fires. I've never seen it that bad.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk a little bit about what people want to understand. Because the California wine industry is by far none. I mean, it's 40 years, 50 years old in the premium world, and it's up there with France and Italy and some of your old guard. And they're very criticized many times because the alcohols are too high, the fruit's too ripe. That same old story. But let's talk a little bit about some of the myths with smoke taint, because 2020 already, I'm already talking to buyers in the retail side, because with Legacy in a Glass, we pitch wines to retailers, other states, and the buyer's saying when 2020 comes, it's going to be smoked out. I want samples because it's over. So you're already getting that bad rap like in 2017. So tell a little bit about really what happens in the world of smoke taint on the vines or on the grapes.
And what's kind of fun, Steve, we reconnected, a few months ago because I was doing news. And so I did wine in the last 18 years, kind of remotely. I would come back and I'd run the harvest. So crush and press, bottling, that kind of thing. I've been around a vineyard since I was 5 years old. So, I knew wine. And in the last year and a half, I now really know wine on the other side. And the reason why I mentioned that is because, with the smoke taint idea, 2017 was, I hadn't come home yet. I was here. We were here for harvest. And then the next day I flew to LA, and I flew back within 12 hours because we had, the massive fires, and I covered those. So really 2018 was my first harvest here full time. And so we had the 2017 juice, and I kept hearing all these people in Napa going, no one's going to buy 2017. The consumer will go for it. And I just didn't make sense to me. And maybe the high-end consumer who really watches these things, but I can tell you from having a tasting room open in downtown Napa for a little over a year now, and we've had about maybe 8,000 people taste. We're a small tasting room, but very busy. And I mention that because when people come in, they have no idea when the fires were in Napa. They know there were a few years ago, but they don't think, 2017 is going to be a smoke year. They don't think that. And I think sometimes we overthink in the industry. And maybe, again, the high-end buyer who's looking for, those wines they may lay down for 15 years, or they may want that $400, $500 bottle of Napa Cab or whatever they happen to be going for. Sure, they may pay closer attention, but the general consumer, which is the mass majority of our market, they're not going to look at the wines 2 years from now and go, that's a 2020. It could be smoke tainted. And I can tell you that because no one asked me about 2017. No one. In our 2017 reserve, you just gave a 92 to. It's a fabulous bottle of wine. You're seeing some of the higher end wineries who, listen, they did well when it came to direct to consumer when COVID hit, but the restaurant sales numbers are down massively because of not being able to be in restaurants. And a lot of those wineries, that's their bread and butter. I mean, they sell 500 1,000 cases to restaurants at least. And so they're stuck now with an extra 500,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 cases. I know a number of very well-known wineries that have amazing wine that have decided to skip 2020 altogether, and they did so after a day of smoke. So I think there's some excuses in that as well. I have a friend who's a winemaker at a very high-end small winery. I think your viewers would know, up in Calistoga. And he's, the other issue you have is, so the first test came back negative. He was one of the first guys to then quickly ferment some of his grapes early and send in the juice. And the juice test came back positives for smoke taint. So there's really, there's really no science on this that everyone is completely on board with. Our winemaker, my original winemaker was Aaron Mosley. You mentioned how Napa's on the board for about 50 years as being premier. Aaron was the assistant winemaker at Chateau Montelena with Mike Gergich winning awards back in the 70s. You remember him. And then we had Jason Fisher, who had some health problems. And then we have Heather Pyle. And Heather's carved out of the same cloth as Aaron was. So she's been in the industry for a long time, was Mondavi's Reserve Cabernet winemaker. Robert picked her to open La Familia de Robert Mondavi.
Yeah, that was the Italian side, right?
You got it. Yeah. So Heather's been, I trust Heather's judgment. She's not some, and she's one of those winemakers I like, because she's old school and new school. So she used the tech side of things, but at the same time, she still, goes by her hunch and her taste. And, we were talking about this the other day, and she goes, Adam, the problem with smoke taint, what they're finding is there's no conclusion to it. The vineyards that really did have smoke taint and got hit hard back in 2017 were the ones that were directly adjacent to the fire, and the thick smoke was going over them. She goes, a lot of the vineyards south part of town where people dumped their grapes, or they ended up dumping the juice or sold it off for nothing. She goes, the wine is fabulous. She goes, it wasn't that thick smoke over it. She goes, I really think that, once again, you're going to have some wineries giving up on a really good vintage. So listen, we're going to make 2020. We're going to do it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I tasted your 2017. I mean, and I probably taste about 1,500 to 2,000 wines a year. And what you just said, as the average consumer, when I taste your 2017, I didn't even think about the fires in 2017, because they're in your mind as long as they're on the news. And once they're gone, you just forget about it,
Totally. And then I didn't realize, so Steve, when you and I were kind of talking about this before I knew I was doing the podcast, some of the questions you brought up to me, I'd asked Heather. I was like, hey, so what about this, about that? I didn't realize there's a couple of ways, if you even have a little smoke taint. Listen, I like a little smokiness to my wine anyway, to be honest with you, to my reds. And that's an inherent, as you know, in some of the reds anyway. It comes out of the barrels. If you toast them, darker than we do, mild toast or medium toast, but some places toast them darker. Point is, if you do have some of that smoke taint, there are actually a couple of very easy ways. There's this expensive way, and there's a more affordable way to actually get that out of your wine. And that's something that, it can be done, and it's not crazy to do. And she explained the two processes to me, and I was like, oh, wow. So, we're pretty confident that, again, our grapes are in Lodi and in Napa. We're in two spots. They're an hour apart. From those who don't know, Lodi is California's largest wine country. It's its first wine country. About 90% of the grapes grown there go into Napa and Sonoma wines. The Mondavis actually came from Lodi, not from Napa. It's a really cool little, reminds me of Napa 30, 40 years ago. So we have grapes in both places, and we're going to harvest in both places. I think that people are giving up on it. I think that in some cases, because of COVID, it's an excuse. I do think there are some legitimate concerns in some places, like, Sonoma Valley and Bennett Valley had some really thick smoke for, more than we had here for a good 2 solid weeks. And so maybe there are some genuine concerns there, but a lot of places in this area, I think, are really going to miss the boat on a good vintage.
But I agree. But, as you said, right on the onset, when we got started, I think, fires over the last couple of years are becoming, more and more obvious. It's something you're going to have to contend with as a California wine producer moving forward, because they seem to be getting closer together and more intense. From what I've seen from going back I've been in the business 32 years, and there've been fires in California, but nothing to the extreme of what's happening here. Where I was in Lake County, I was in California last February 2019, and you're still seeing the ridgeline driving up to Lake County, where you could see right where the fire stopped. It was all burnt, back in the mountains driving to Lake County, and That's got to have an impact on, when you have 5 million acres, whether it's vineyards or not, yet that's totally burnt to the ground. It resets kind of that ecological balance, I would think. It's got to affect somehow with some of the ridge lines, and some of the, some of those microclimates have to change, I would think. You think?
Yeah, listen, there's the whole debate on climate change. And, I always look at it this way: whether you think it's real or you don't think it's real, I don't really care. I want to leave the place cleaner than I found it. I want to do it in a respectful way that doesn't take away my rights either. So I think there's a balance that can be found politically. I just want to get that out there first. So then takes climate change, set it aside. There's also the fact, and even our governor in California and a few other governors in the West have now, governor in Oregon has admitted too, we haven't raked the forest. And when I say rake the forest, I don't mean using a rake like you do in your yard. It's actually a bulldozer that has a big attachment to the front, and for 50 years, we haven't done that. and the environmental, and I believe in the environment as well. You can find, again, you can find a balance. So I'm not a card carrying member of the environmental lobby, but I'm also not, a person that denies things either. I'm kind of in the middle on it. And I just say that because, we haven't taken care of the forest. I mean, Native Americans in California have burned the forest floor for thousands of years in order to maintain it. So a lot of this stuff is happening. I mean, the fires that we had in Napa this time were all lightning started. And I think that, there is going to be a reset in a lot of parts of the valley. Now, having been here for the last, 48 years of my life and covering the fires here and seeing them when I was a child, pretty much there's not much left to burn anymore, Steve. So I think we're past the big fires, at least in our area. What concerned me this time was the fact that these fires that turned our sky red and socked us in all over California, all over Oregon, all over Washington, all over British Columbia, all over Idaho, and you're seeing now in Pennsylvania, those fires were 3 hours from us. So I don't know what to expect. I think that because it's a COVID year, I'm wondering how, if we didn't have COVID, if wineries would have reacted the same way and growers would have reacted the same way. I know this: if you're someone who's wants to try wine for the first time, it's a good time to pick up some, you can get really affordable Cabernet grapes in the market.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen with just being on this side of the industry and being a buyer for as many years as I was. And Pennsylvania was a huge buyer for California. They still are with the chairman selection program, and there seems to be a lot of juice in the market, but that's been that way. I mean, where I get critical with the domestic industry, specifically California, is how it's cannibalized. I mean, you have 4 or 5 companies that have 98% of what's on the retail shelves anymore, and small family wineries like yourself, kind of are left to their own to find companies like Legacy in the Glass, because we only select small family wineries and small production. We like worrying about what's in the glass before what's on the bottle, and getting back to what you were saying, between Lodi and Napa, you have properties, and I've tasted both your wines, and they're outstanding in the past. Lodi has always been kind of that it's always been known as like, well, it's commodity, it's commercial. They're adding fertilizers. There's big bulk wine industry there, and maybe it was back in the 60s, 70s when it first started. But when I tasted Century Oak for the first time, we're talking 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago, when I came to California, met Jason Fisher and met your dad, and I mean, it really throws you back that Lodi is every bit of Napa in style that you want, and even riper at times with a bit more. I get a bit more balance because I tasted the 2017 and even the 2016, which is here. I'm featuring your labels, your Century Oak labels here. And the 2016, when you said smoke, this has a little smoky herb edge to it on the 2016, but in a good way. Because when I wrote that note, I thought, the fires and everything going on, it might. But that's what I get, and I kind of like that touch at times. And I think the balance in your 16 is just impeccable. And the 17 takes you back to a time, I think, with Heather Pyle, that gives you much more. It's very Mondavi-ish with its cocoa, but it's got its tobacco, and it's got its balance, got its complexities, where it's still elegant, but it gives you all the power of what Napa brings, in my opinion.
No, totally. I mean, the 16 is a well-balanced Cabernet. I call it your overperforming house wine. It's that Cabernet. It's going to go with anything. It's got a good balance of fruit with that little hint of smokiness to it. I think it's a fabulous Cabernet. And what I like about Heather is that she makes the vintage to the vintage. She doesn't try to make everyone exactly the same. And, you can make a mistake by doing that, because then your wines don't have that year-to-year change. It's almost like a different car. Your 2016 might look a little different than 2017. It's still a Porsche, but it's but it's a little bit different. And I like how she does that with her wines. Our 2016 is fabulous. I'm a huge fan of it. I know you liked it as well. And the 2017 it takes you back to old Napa. That's why I call it, my opinion. I mean, I haven't been a wine drinker. I've only been a wine drinker for 20 some odd years now because of my age. Obviously, I started in my mid 20s. I went from beer to wine. I jumped straight into it, by the way. But I've had some older Napa stuff. That's obviously, when I first started, especially, back then you could have a 1999, a 10-year-old bottle of wine was the late 80s. So, which now is 30 years ago, which is crazy to think. But, it reminds me of those wines that I would have back then, the earlier Napa wines. And the thing about Lodi is, when we opened our tasting room there in our little facility, because we've been growing grapes in Napa since 1976, my pop started from nothing. Started the winery from nothing. We all threw in about 20 grand and started a little winery. And we did it in Lodi because, Napa at that time was 7 years from concept to creation. And we were thinking, well, it doesn't really matter where you make the wine. It matters how you grow it and where you grow it. And we have relatives in Lodi, and actually we're in an area called Acampo, which is northwest Lodi. And Lodi is finally done. So back then, first of all, we opened in 2001, which was fabulous. Real excited about that. And when we opened, and now there's 84, 86 tasting rooms there. The concept was let's make a good bottle of wine. Let's make a good, solid bottle of Cabernet. And we've expanded that out. And I think Lodi's done a good job doing that as well. Just kind of gradually realizing that, hey, we can be a player too in this industry. And when we opened the tasting room in Napa, it was kind of funny because our Napa label, we don't make a lot. That's the idea. We're still affordable. The average Napa Cabernet is $75 a bottle. Ours is $48. Our idea is that we're doing this all ourselves. But we want to make it, a true family-run winery that has consistency. And you're not going to find the bottle sitting on at a certain certain well-known grocery chain where it's at $9.99 a bottle. It's not what we're trying to make. But we're also not trying to make a $75 bottle. I mentioned that because when we opened the tasting room in Napa, we had our Napa labels there, and I brought the Lodi labels over. Because Napa and Lodi have been brothers or sisters for 70 years. And it was funny. At first, people were like, you're bringing Lodi. I mean, I grew up there, so I can do this, right? People were like, you're bringing Lodi to Napa. Kind of snotty. A couple of people were, and I'm like, listen, are you from here? Well, yeah, I've been here 25 years. I'm like, well, I was born and raised in Yountville. So you know what? I'm going to admit it. And if you don't want to admit it, that's your call. Well, guess what? Now I have a number of wineries who've approached me going, hey, just some good grapes over in Lodi. We'd like to do a Lodi label. So I think people are starting to realize, and that reminds me of back in maybe the early 2000s when Napa and Sonoma started putting Old Vine Zinfandel Lodi on their label. And what Lodi finally did as a part of all this now in modern days, they finally got their AVAs because Lodi, like Napa or Sonoma, there's a lot of different growing areas out there. And our area is the northwest part, which is where the McCullummy River comes through. So we're in the McCullummy River AVA, which is very loamy soil, which is similar to Napa. So we're really happy with where we're located. We think we grow really good grapes out there, and it's only an hour away. So it's an easy drive, and it's fun to have your hand in both places.
But exactly what we believe in here. I mean, we've traveled. When we went out there, we just didn't concentrate on Napa Sonoma. We were in Lodi, we were in Livermore, we were in Mendocino. We go to the lesser known regions, and I'm going to tell you, the wine, if you blind taste it, the people won't even realize. And I really think Lodi it's arrived because at least in the Century Oak stable. And hey, thanks for coming on the podcast today, brother. Let's stay in touch. Century Oak Winery, Adam Housley. Thanks, buddy.
Anytime, Steve. Great talking with you.
See you, brother.